the people catch feelings elsewhere in the capital. This evening, we have a wonderful conversation. As we've heard, it's the 5th series of the Kililogues. This is the second since COVID, and this one focuses on COVID and families. And we hope to discuss some of the myths that we've seen with COVID-19. What we're going to do now is to start by showing a video that we took in the community yesterday. So I'm going to ask Doreen if she can set that up for us so that we could just listen to people's views on the streets of Kilimani. And we took this on the what used to be called the Devil's Junction. And I don't mean to frighten anybody, but this was a junction that without traffic lights was extremely confusing for many, both pedestrians and the vehicles. Fortunately, we now have lights here, and that's the Yaya Junction. So this video is brought to you by Movavi, the company that has helped us put this together. Allow me to switch that on. Over to you, Doreen. Take it away.
Salam, everyone. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Kilimani. We've spent the afternoon talking to the residents of this neighborhood about their questions around COVID, the vaccine, and the impact of this pandemic on their everyday lives. I have to tell you, we've learned a lot from young people, from the women and men whose daily lives have been completely impacted by this vaccine and they've had this pandemic, and they've had fantastic questions for us to think about and reflect on as we think about what the rest of this year and the coming years will look like as we live in this new normal of COVID-19.
Na umesikia juu ya chanjo yake?
Yeah, juu ya chanjo yake nilisikia. Iko wanataka watu waende wadungwe hiyo shindano, so iko available kwa kila mtu.
Okay. Na umeenda?
Mimi sijaenda.
Kwa nini?
Sijaenda kwa sababu nimekuwa ushago. Ndio nimerudi hii Saturday, lakini nitaenda tu.
Okay. So hauogopi unaweza enda wakikwambia kuja kwa hii hospitali ziko?
Naenda kwa sababu si free na inaniprotect mimi.
Okay. So hauna hofu yoyote? Unajua mtu ameipata hiyo chanjo?
Yeah.
Nani?
One of my friends.
Alisema nini?
Aliniambia walitaka kazini ndio ufanye huko kuwe na hiyo barua yenye naonyeshwa umechanjwa. Sasa yeye akaniambia ameenda Coptic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Na kwa mwili, yani kwa mwili amesikiaje ama?
Sasa kwa mwili hakunieleza vile ina react ya.
Do you have any fear of taking the vaccine?
I used to have before, but now I've seen a lot of people being injected, and yeah, it's really okay because yeah, you're gonna be safe from the virus.
What were your fears before you saw people taking jabs?
Okay, it was like the way we were vaccinated when we were small. Yeah, so I was fearing because of the syringe. I hate syringe, I can't lie. But yeah, it's very good to be vaccinated, yeah.
Do you know anybody who has been vaccinated yet?
I've had one, but he works, yeah, he's one of our residents, so yeah, they told me about that.
Where was he vaccinated?
He said, I don't know if it was Bagadi, but yeah, I didn't want to follow up.
Wewe umechukua vaccine, umesikia juu ya vaccine?
Vaccine tumesikia juu ya vaccine, lakini bado hujapata opportunity ama venye tunaweza chukua. Bado sisi hatujachukua vaccine bado.
Okay, umesikia nini juu ya hiyo vaccine?
Tumesikia ni vaccine, tumesikia ni yenye inasaidia, ni vaccine poa kwa mwili, but sisi bado hatujapata.
So ukipata nafasi unaweza endea?
Tukipata nafasi tunaweza endea. Jili ni vaccine na kinga ni bora. Kinga ni bora kuliko tiba.
Uko na hofu yoyote juu ya vaccine?
Tuko na hofu, tuko na hofu jili.
Nani kuchukua vaccine?
Kuogopa, mnaiogopa yani?
Hatuogopi jili sasa, hatujaogopa jili hatujasikia bado any side effect yake venye imefanya watu. Sasa hatuna hofu nayo. Tuko ready hata ikikuja tutachukua.
I talked to another young man who has lived here in Nairobi for many years, and one of his biggest concerns is getting his parents vaccinated. His parents live in Ethiopia, and he's been trying to communicate to them the safety of the vaccine. But their concern is, as observant Orthodox believers, they are hesitant to take a vaccine that they believe has been developed using human life in some form. It really flies against the principles and the values of their faith, much like arguments around abortion do. And so their concern is we can't take something that has been developed at the cost of human life, and we would rather just do our part to stay safe and mask and distance, as opposed to taking a vaccine that we don't have full faith in.
Great. Thank you very much to Kilimani Broadcasting Corporation. It's not just Citizen that we have here. It's also a amateur group of journalists that went onto the ground, and that was taken just outside Yara, I believe, at about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So we've got lots of things that are being said here. One is that people are aware that the vaccine is available. They they know that they can get access to it. They are worried about the syringe, the pain of being injected. And Spider-Man, otherwise known as Don, the Prince of Kilimani, as he calls himself, he fears the syringe. And I think the last comment that we had was really that a number of people are concerned that the vaccine was tested possibly on live, DNA, live material, whether it be fetuses, and therefore, from a religious point of view, they are concerned about taking the vaccine. So on that note, I'm going to hand this over to two wonderful people who will be our moderator and our guest for the evening. Our moderator is Lily Piper, and she is the host of Uproot. It's a wonderful podcast, and tonight's Kililogue is a partnership with Uproot, and she will take us through the next part of this conversation. I also have the pleasure of welcoming Daktari Githinji Gitahi, who is the group CEO of Amref Health. And Amref is very well known to us. I suspect at some point he may have lived in Kilimani. This is how he probably could start his presentation. If not, we may have to ask him what is his relationship with Kilimani. That would be interesting. Welcome to everybody. I hope you have a lot of fun this evening. It is really a moment for discussion, and I can see a lot of people from the community. I can see my father from Austin, Texas. Welcome. So we've got a wide set of people on the call today. Over to you, Lily.
Here we go. You hear me now?
Yes, loud and clearly.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kilimani Project Foundation. It's really an honor to be invited into your community and to this conversation today. It's really a privilege. And Irungu, failed to add in my East African connection because I'm a part of the Kiliaspora. So it's Lily Bakala Piper. Just migrated a bit south from Ethiopia a few years ago, here to Kenya, which has been my home for the last 10 years. And Dr. Gitahi, Karibu, it's just an honor to have you here on the program today.
Thank you very much. And nice to meet you, Lily. And for Irungu, my very long-time friend, we are in the zones of battle together in the front lines, fighting for human rights. Irungu is a more courageous soldier than I am out there, but we are on the battlefront together. But Irungu, just to tell you that, yes, I've lived in Kilimani I don't live there now, but I've lived there for a very long time. And I do business in Kilimani. I'm always in Kilimani. I mean, there's no week that will pass without me coming to being in Kilimani. My business, my friends, I meet people in Kilimani. So I'm part of the Kilimani community.
They call us Kiliaspora, by the way. We have an official designation, okay. Yes. What's next is going to be some travel document that they're going to require of us, I'm sure, at any point now. So, Dr. We have so many questions for you. Kilimani Project Foundation took a poll, actually, of its membership and more broadly in the public sphere to ask what are the questions that are on people's minds around COVID, around the vaccine. As you saw in the video, we spent a couple hours yesterday also just asking passersby and neighbors their thoughts. And so there's a lot of questions to ask you. I'll try and move as quickly as I can and capture some of the main sentiments that we have heard from our neighbors and our community. Let me start with this question. It might sound simple, but I think it's something that we still see coming up is, how does the vaccine work and how is it developed? You heard Arungu mention now just that some concerns that we heard yesterday about from those religious communities who don't feel comfortable with how it was developed. So can you give us the everyday layman's terms about how the vaccine was developed?
All right, good question. And I think it's good to start from the basics. So number one is what's a vaccine? Let's first start with our own bodies. Now, our own bodies, when you're born, you come from a sterile environment in the womb, completely sterile, protected from viruses, bacteria, and anything else. But when you are born, you come into this world where viruses and bacteria are in our community. They are part of us, actually. If I was to take a healthy human being and check viruses on their hands, on their face, in their mouth, every part of their body, I will find millions and millions of viruses and bacteria. So we live with them. But how come we live with them but they don't affect us? It is because we have something we call innate immunity or natural immunity that we are born with. So when a baby is born and they come out, they have the immunity, and that, what we call non-specific immunity, includes your skin. Your skin is part of your protection, so that if it's broken, you're more likely to be infected than when it's integral. So this is the normal immunity that we have. But then, as we grow, we meet new organisms. When a baby is born, they will come across a bacteria that may cause pneumonia, or they may come across a malaria parasite or another virus. How do they protect themselves from this? They develop immunity that's called acquired immunity. So the first one is you're born with. But then you may acquire acquired immunity. Now, this acquired immunity, which is your own way of protecting yourself against new things, can be acquired either by being infected, in which case when you get infected, your body has its own mechanism of recognizing the enemy that has gotten into you that you didn't know before, and then very quickly adjusting itself and creating some things we call antibodies, almost like bullets or ammunition against that particular organism. It's like if you have an attack on your house and you were not prepared, there are things you do. You quickly get things up, you probably put a chair behind the window, you get a knife in the kitchen. That's what the body does. But what if you wanted to develop the immunity without waiting for the attack on your house? What would you do? That's a vaccine. You would then put cameras, you would put this, you'd put burglar proofing. This is what the vaccine does. So the vaccine actually gives you a view of, in case you're attacked by these viruses, this is how you'd respond. That's what we call a vaccine. So how do you develop it? Because there is a question I had there that's an important question. So you need to first identify the organism that's likely to cause the challenge. So how do you identify? Some people are infected, they have probably died, and therefore you're like, that's of concern. So you identify that particular organism, you then take it to the lab and identify key features around it, and then you say, if the body was to be attacked by this virus, it needs to develop antibodies that look like follows. And therefore you use animals first to test. So you don't use human beings and fetuses. You use animals. That's what we call preclinical phase. And when you've applied this thing to the animals and you've seen the kind of antibodies they use or they develop, then you now map those antibodies and then you develop what we call a clinical phase 1. And you now use a few human beings who volunteer to be part of it. And those human beings are given these antibodies, and then you see how they develop. Then you go to phase 2, you use more, phase 3, you use even more, until you are confirmed that, and all these phases require approval at every phase. And finally, you are told this is safe, it has been shown to be effective, and therefore it can go to the market. So that's the process that we follow. But vaccines are different types. And remember that vaccines started in the 18th century, so they're not new. So they have been with that. They're the reason we don't have children dying of all these diseases. So this is the bigger picture of vaccine use.
So let me add on to that a similar question. So in that development, I think some of the concern is, we had heard right when COVID hit, it's going to be 4 years before they develop a vaccine. It's going to take time. So now when we see ourselves a year later of these being widely, globally available, people are concerned about the time it took. So was the same rigor applied in these vaccine developments as it was for yellow fever or other vaccines that we're a bit more familiar with and comfortable with?
Correct. And that's a valid concern that people have because, of course, traditionally, we have actually taken up to 10 years or 6 years to develop vaccines. But let me give you an example. Many years ago, how long did it take you to take money to your parents in Ethiopia from Kenya? You probably went, you queued, you sent the money.
You have to find somebody who's going even.
Or you find somebody who's going, you say, when are you leaving? You go to their house, you give them the money. You take. Even for us, I don't go, we'll know, we would wait, go to the bus stop, you give it an envelope, then you tell your mother, please wait for this bus. But how does it happen now? Your mother calls and says, hey, do you have 1,000 shillings? Send me. And you're like, yes, mommy, and you send it. So technology and science develops. It doesn't only develop for M-Pesa or for mobile money, it also develops for medicines. So this is what we must recognize, that technology for vaccines has been developing over time. And therefore we expect the same rapid development to happen. But does it follow then the same ethical clearance, preclinical space, clinical phase 1, 2, 3, 4, exactly the same. That's number one. Number two is that for a pandemic, remember that we've not had a pandemic like this since 1918. Now, when we have one like this that's so disruptive, what we expect government to do? To put money. The US government put in $1.5 billion last year to support Moderna and Pfizer and others, Johnson & Johnson, to develop the vaccine. What does that mean? That with new technology and with so much money, it becomes even more faster to actually do the steps that you need to do. What the final step? Because again, this 100 years, we've not experienced this, and this is disruptive. The regulatory agencies are aware and they are waiting. So something that would have taken you 3 months to file, they're like, no, we are waiting. We have actually cleared our desks, bring your paperwork. So this is why it was actually accelerated.
So it's as if YQA was cleared for a presidential motorcade. No one is going on that road except the vaccine from A to Z, from testing, trial to approvals to the public. That's really helpful to hear, because I think somehow in the marketing of this campaign, I think they've missed opportunities to actually educate the public on how the supply chain was really conducted and moved forward, which is then I think caused what we're now understanding as vaccine hesitancy. Okay, so we understand it's been rigorously tested. The regulatory bodies were ready and waiting. They fast-tracked this in order to respond to this disruptive and truly terrible vaccine. What about some of the long-term studies that may have come under another disease, maybe that was not with such urgency or needed such an urgent response? Some of the questions we heard were, do we know what the long-term effects of the vaccine specifically will be? You know, do we know in 5 years what this will look like? There's some really terrible things on the internet about everyone who's had this vaccine, this will happen to you in 2 years, or any number of rumors. So talk to us about that. How can we, I guess, continue to be rooted in the fact that 2 years, 5 years from now, there's not going to be some kind of new information that's going to unsteady us or unsteady our faith in this vaccine?
Yeah, again, a good question. Now, what happens is that there are multiple technology approaches to making vaccines. Now, some of the vaccines, remember that in the COVID era, we have about 300 candidates. A candidate is a vaccine under development. So we have more than 300. Out of those, about 7 or 8 have been approved. Now, when you look at these, then you ask yourself, this technology they are using, how long has it been known? Has it been used in the past? Okay, because then you would expect long-term effects to come from generally this particular scientific platform. Now, so we know, for example, there are cars, there are diesel engines, there are petrol engines. So are these vaccines being developed the same platforms as those developed in the past? So largely, yes. So if you look at, for example, AstraZeneca, it uses a vaccine platform we call a vector vaccine. So you use another virus, you put in the genetic code of the disease that you think you want to challenge the body on, and that platform has been used for Ebola vaccines all the way from 2014. So then you look at others like Johnson & Johnson and Novavax, the same platform used for polio and BCG is what has been used. So you start to see their similar platforms, and therefore you are able to say how long, are there other effects that are known. Now the new vaccines like Pfizer and Moderna are used on what's called the messenger RNA. Now that platform has been under study for more than 6 years. So we know it's been under study. It's not been discovered for COVID. It's actually been under study for other diseases as well. So that gives you comfort that actually there is wide scientific evidence around these platforms.
So is that linked to the fact that we know COVID is a part of this coronavirus family of viruses that they've also, it's not new to scientists, right? This is COVID-19 specifically because it's maybe the 19th version of this virus that scientists have seen. And so they're numbering it. So is that also, are we seeing also the impact of a virus they know in some form, you know, it's like the cousin of the original, but it's still related, coupled with a system that has been tested and tried for other diseases. Am I understanding that science correctly?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's actually like you've been to an epidemiology class. So
you're rubbing off on me.
The thing to say is this, that the coronaviruses have been viruses that have been in human beings, in animals for a very long time. There are probably more than 1,000 known coronaviruses, but they reside in animals, okay? But because of urbanization and climate change, they have started to shift to human beings. So they have been known, they are not new. Now, how many have then jumped? About 7 of them have come to human beings over the last 20 years or so. So when we talk about MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, when we talk about SARS, they are all coronaviruses. So there have been huge studies on coronaviruses for the last 10, 15 years. So coronavirus causing COVID-19 is one more of the 6 now makes 7. So the coronaviruses are well known and they are not new to COVID. Now, COVID-19, COVID is a disease. The virus is called SARS-CoV-2, or it's a long name, so we don't have to go through that. Right. That's what causes the COVID disease, but it's actually a coronavirus, just like the other thousands that are known, but only 7 have been known to infect human beings.
Okay. So let's talk about our home, our beloved home here in East Africa. You know, there has been, I think now once the vaccine entered Kenya a couple of months ago, and the first jabs are starting to roll out, and now we're a few weeks removed from that initial entry point. Questions about specifically around the rollout and the access to the vaccine are increasing, I think, day by day. So let's talk about what we have here in Kenya. What is legitimately available here in Kenya for people to take in terms of the vaccine?
The answer to your question is what is legitimately available in Kenya is AstraZeneca, and the AstraZeneca specifically from the Serum Institute of India, because the AstraZeneca again is being manufactured in different countries. The one that's in Kenya and in African countries is from Serum Institute of India. So it's called Covishield. That's why you hear these names and people are wondering why is this one this and not this. It's called Covishield by branding. Now, as I said, there are about 7 or 8 vaccines that have been approved for use generally. And when we talk approved for use, then you have to talk about who approved them, because as a country like Kenya, we have to also have some standards. It doesn't mean that the others are bad, but they haven't been approved through our recognized regulatory agency. So for Kenya, the government has decided to follow the World Health Organization. Not that it's the only approver, but the Kenya has decided, let's follow the ones approved by WHO. So out of the ones approved by WHO, we have AstraZeneca, we have Pfizer, we have Moderna, and now we have J&J, Johnson & Johnson. Does it mean that we don't have other vaccines? No. Sinopharm, Sinovac from China, Sputnik from Russia are also vaccines that are available and they have been approved by other regulatory agencies by their countries, but not by WHO. So Kenya has decided to follow WHO. And within those for WHO, AstraZeneca is the one that is legally available in the country.
Okay. So recently there has been the extension between the first jab and the second. It's extended from 8 weeks to 12 weeks. We had a few questions. Why? Why was it extended? Will I be okay with just one jab? So 2 questions there. Why was it extended? And, you know, if I'm not around for that second jab somehow, will I be okay with just one? This is a good time to take water. That's a big question. Pressure here on a good answer.
Thank you, Lily. Now, it's good for people to first understand why you need a first and second dose so that we can then slowly get into it. Number one is when you let's assume there are no vaccines. I say there is 2 ways you can develop acquired immunity. You can
Yes.
develop acquired immunity by getting infected by the particular organism or by being vaccinated. Now, either way, even if you are infected, your first contact with that particular virus or bacteria gives you what's called a primary response. And then if you get infected again, you get what's called a secondary response, which then boosts your ability to protect yourself in the future. Okay? Now, vaccines mimic the same thing. So you say you get your first dose, it gives you a primary response. So it triggers your body to start processing this thing. You know, it sees these new proteins, because vaccines and the viruses and bacteria, what they do is they introduce a new protein to you that you didn't know before. Now, when the body gets that protein, it takes a bit of it, runs back to its factory and starts to study it. And after it studies it, it's like, this is what we need to do, and starts to develop some, mechanism to develop, antibodies. That takes time, and that's the fast response. So the body keeps some memory, develops some ammunition. So when you give it this again, you can imagine what happens. The body is already aware of that protein. And therefore now the second response is built on a foundation of knowledge. And therefore you have a much better response. That's the reason for the second vaccine. Now, what happens is from protein to protein, meaning from virus to virus, or it depends on the vaccine and the nature of the vaccine to determine how far the 2 doses should be. For Pfizer, we know 3 to 4 weeks. For AstraZeneca, we know it's 8 to 12 weeks. Now, what happens is this, that the researchers will give the vaccine to many people, thousands of them, and then they'll monitor the response through what we call measuring the antibodies developed. And they'll measure them over time. And they will see that maybe by week 8, there is adequate immunity for you to give the second dose. But as they keep monitoring, they might see actually it's even better at 12 weeks. So this data keeps expanding and keeps developing. So originally when we started the rollout, the advice was 8 weeks. But now we have data that shows that actually if you give the second dose at 12 weeks, the individual has even a better response when you space them out than when you give them at 8 weeks. So that is the science that has developed, and that's the advice of WHO. That's why the government is shifting from 8 to 12 weeks.
Okay. Yeah. Now, for some reason, I got the first dose, something happens and I'm unable to get the second dose. How will my body respond to the virus if I encounter COVID-19 with just 1 dose? And again, we'll talk specifically about AstraZeneca because that's what we have here.
So again, I'll go back to the original foundational science that we are giving you acquired immunity. And you can acquire this immunity by being infected or getting the vaccine. Now, if we go back to that, it therefore means if you have had an infection of COVID before, you already have your first initial immunity. Okay? The question is, how long does that immunity last? And how strong is it? We can't still answer that question, but we know that that first immunity from an infection may last anywhere 6 to 8 months. You still have the antibodies, you're still protected. So when you now, if we were to put a parallel and say you've received your first dose, it is equivalent to your first infection. Therefore, when you get your first dose, you also build adequate immunity, just as if you are actually infected. And that could also last for 6, 8, 12 months. So we can expand that. So the second dose just gives you expanded, longer immunity and stronger immunity, just like if you had your first infection. So ideally we say that with your first infection, it's like getting your first dose. And with your first dose, you have built adequate immunity just as if you're infected. And we think that actually you get probably a level of up to 50-60% of if you had both doses. So already your first dose by 14th day gives you some level of immunity. And that's why we don't have, even in the first infection, we don't have a lot of reinfections. They are very rare. It's just like getting the first dose. We don't expect you to get severe disease after you have had your first dose. So no one should worry. And if you don't get your second dose, you don't get any harm in your body. You probably just don't get as strong an immunity as somebody who got both doses.
And I think it's worth pointing out, thank you so much for that, and just being so clear. I think it's worth pointing out too, because some people confuse, well, I'm going to wait till Kenya has Johnson & Johnson or something. AstraZeneca is only 60 or 70%. But if I understand the science correctly, all those vaccines that you said, of the 300 that were in trial, maybe the 7 or 8 that are now passing regulatory bodies, all of them had 0% of patient or participants in those trials who were hospitalized or died as a result of exposure to COVID-19. So that efficacy is quite incredible. Is that right?
That's a really good point, Lily, and I think I'll take you into my epidemiology class to start.
Kindly.
Because really, that's the point that people must understand. Because what I've had people ask me is, no, I'm going to wait for the one that's 90%. I don't this one that is 70%. Now, let me say
we all want to get A level. We don't want to stop at halfway. No, so
exactly. Yeah. Let us go back to the fact, what does 80 or 60 or 90 mean? Now, when you're doing a study, you give the vaccine to, let's say, 10,000 people. And then you monitor how many of those 10,000 got severe disease that needs hospitalization. And you monitor how many got moderate disease, meaning they had, some serious symptoms, but didn't go to hospital. And then you say, out of the 10,000, 70% did not get either moderate or severe disease. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that when it's given in your body, it's only 70% effective. It is out of this population, okay? Now, we know that all these vaccines, none of the people who had the vaccine got severe disease to resort to death or hospitalization. 0, meaning that they are all 100% effective in protecting against severe disease. But when you come to moderate disease, some of them had a few more people getting moderate disease, but none of them had anyone ending up with ICU hospitalization. And that's an important point for people to remember. Because that's really what you want. That's what you want, is to protect yourself against severe disease. And they're all 100% effective against
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that so clearly. I think that's really, really important. I think we'll have to keep reminding ourselves of that. I'm sensitive to the time, so let me get to a few more questions that came from our poll very quickly. And Irungu, you'll just flag me when we start to go too long here. We're watching what's happening in India with tremendous heartache. It's just heartbreaking. But I feel like, is there a lesson we can learn here in Kenya from what's happening in India? And can you help us understand why has it spiraled in the way it has? I know that's a complicated question that you would have to go through 15, 16 months of history, but in brief, could you tell us, why is India just spiraled, and what can we learn from what's happening in India here in Kenya?
Now, let me say that probably if we have another Kililogue 12 months from now, that question could be asked about Africa. What happened to Africa? Why did it spiral like that? So we must remember that. Because I think a lot of people think it's something happening in India. If you look at how India was managing COVID last year, if you look at their waves and everything, it was quite innocuous. Until people started saying, India has escaped the virus. There were a lot of those conversations. We must remember that even Africa is likely to end up exactly where India is now. Now, what has driven what has happened to India? There are 3 things we need to remember: that the virus and the transmission of the virus is dependent on movement of individuals. That when you have an infected person and then you put them in certain situations with other people, then the virus has a perfect condition for movement. Those conditions are: 1, crowding; 2, close contact; 3, closed spaces. Those 3 C's, and then you add T, which is time. So you say, if you have crowding, in close contact, in a closed space for a long time, you have a perfect condition to infect everyone. Now, if you look at the population of India and movement, then you can start to see why that happened: religious holidays, political rallies. Now, why did it happen in Italy? Why did those 3 C's and T come together in Italy and in the US before India? Because if you look at what we call mass transport systems, they are more prevalent in Europe. In fact, in Africa, we saw this happening in South Africa, because South Africa has more mass transport systems than any of us. That's why Morocco and Egypt and Ethiopia and South Africa were leading in Africa. and Kenya is following, and countries like Uganda and Tanzania are behind. It's because of movement, because when you have many people moving together from place to place, then those three C's and T are in perfect orchestra.
Yeah.
So basically, that's what has happened in India. Now, what is the next thing? That the worry is not the infection, because when the virus is there and you're not vaccinated, you expect people to get infected. So what worries us public health people is the speed of infection, not the infection. So when you have a rapid speed of infection or a high force of transmission, then you fear that instead of having 100 people infected today, you have 10,000 infected today. If you had 100, only one would have required ICU. If you have 10,000 and use the same percentage, then you have 1,000 requiring ICU. Then you start to worry. I can provide for one needing ICU, but I can't provide for 1,000. Then you start to worry about the capacity of your health system. If your health system was limitless, then you don't have to do any lockdown. You let people get infected and you take care of them. So what has happened in India is that they have more people needing hospitalization than their health system can manage. So this is really the question we need to ask ourselves. Are we getting more people who need hospitalization than our health system can manage? Which then brings the complexity of how strong is your health system. Therefore, all of us must push for the government to invest in the health system, because if we had more ICU beds than we have now, we wouldn't need lockdowns. We would just say, let the people get infected and we are able to take care of them. So this is the thinking that we must have. So if we have a huge surge in Kenya, we would have to lock down, because otherwise you'd have to watch people die in casualty or in the ambulance because they can't get a bed. That's really the issue, not the actual viral infection.
So I'm going to send it back to Irungu, but I think in summary, I think I really hear you saying to all of us, the fight is not over yet. We need to continue to do our part, even as government has relaxed some restrictions. The masking, the distancing, avoiding large crowds and close spaces are going to be incredibly important for us to stay on a track towards any sense of, a healthy environment. And Dr. We're going to take a break and hear from those who are on the call and who are elsewhere joining us. But I think we'll have a few minutes at the end to come back, and I want you to be prepared to give us some thoughts on the variants and vaccine equity, which you have been talking about this week through your platforms, and really looking forward to your thoughts on that. But we'll pause here and send it back to our friend Irungu.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Dr. Bekele Piper. There are a couple of questions that will come up, which I'll give to Lily. I think you can see them there, that we can have Dr. Gidinji respond to after the small Mentimeter that we're going to do. So I'm going to invite everybody to go to a browser or another device, and in the chat, I hope you can see this. There is a link that you can access, but I'll just read it out so that you've got it. So I'm going to ask you, if you can, to go to this website, www.menti, as in the county, MENTI.com. So it's www.menti.com. And then when you get to that landing page, if you can use the code as follows: 69 82 20 78. Again, 69 82 20 78. So you should be at the first question. And the first question again is, what are the risks of taking the vaccine in your view? What are the risks of taking the vaccine in your view? Again, www.menti.com, MENTI.com. And then secondly, use the code 69 82 20 78. This, like the Electoral Commission system, is completely anonymous and reliable, and it shows instant results, a bit unlike our general elections. We have recommended to the incoming selection panel of the electoral commissioners that they use Menti going forward. It's much cheaper. Once again, the code is 69 82 20 78. Okay, a couple more. This is providing lots of food for thought for the two doctors, the moderator and the resource person. So once again, it's www.menti.com, menti.com, and then use the code 69822078. Instant polling. Let me allow a few more people to give their views. And again, welcome to the 48 people who've joined us so far on this platform. And I'm sure there are a few more out there on the Facebook platform also. You are all very welcome. Okay, what are the risks of taking the vaccine? You might become sterile, you might zombify, you might get blood clots, you might not get a second jab, you might get fever, fatigue, a headache, muscle pain, and there may be others. Okay, we have 16 inputs. I'll just wait for maybe a couple more. I think the zombify question is probably the most dramatic one for anybody who watches Walking Dead.
I'm curious to know if Dr. has been vaccinated, because maybe we can use him as a case study here.
Absolutely. One of the things that I just want to mention, I think people are having difficulty chatting in the group. It seems that the settings are set so that people not everybody can see the chats that are coming into the group. So I'll just ask the technicians if they can look at that a little bit. We are seeing your questions, so keep them coming. I've seen questions from John, from Robert Emerson, from Segeni Mungai, and others. And Lily, if you can't see them, I can quickly recreate them for you. So I'm going to move to the second question, and thank you to the 21 of you who have voted. Unfortunately for the others, you will get a chance on the second question. Here goes. I'm now changing the screen. So the question is this: in an ideal world, what vaccine would you prefer? Now, we have already heard that the vaccine that is available is the AstraZeneca vaccine, but which vaccine, if you had the choice, would you choose? Is it Pfizer? Is it Moderna? Is it Johnson & Johnson? Is it Sputnik? Is it the CoronaVac Sinopharm? That's the Chinese vaccine. What would you choose? And I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary is on this call right now. So vote wisely, because you may change the course of our public health policy. That's a joke, people. Don't take me seriously, particularly you people on Facebook. Honorable Kagwe will call me immediately and say I'm stirring up trouble. Let's just have a sense of what people would elect to take if they had the choice. And just for those of you who are looking for Panadol, we have removed all of the ones that are not relevant. Panadol, Ino, hizo zingine haitatusaidia. So AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, Sputnik, CoronaVac, and Sinopharm. I was a little bit worried when we were doing this exercise because I thought maybe I would start some kind of a pharmaceutical war among the companies. So if you are working for a pharmaceutical company, please do not act on this. We are compliant with government policy, which is only government-approved vaccines will be made available. Okay, great. We have 17 on this one. I'm going to 18. Maybe we'll take a couple more, and then we'll go to the last question. And the last one is a little bit easier. Okay, so very quickly, Pfizer seems to be the preferred choice, followed by Johnson & Johnson, which is not just a baby oil, as I discovered recently, then AZ, and followed by Moderna, and then Sputnik, and then unfortunately the Chinese pharmaceutical companies will be very sad to hear this. The last one on the list is Sinopharm. Let me turn to the last question, and then we'll come back to you, Lily. So we're on the last question, and the last question, some of you, I hope this is not rigged. I mean, some of you already answered this before I've even turned to it. This is a bit kind of worrying. Maybe we won't advertise this to the Electoral Commission. Have you taken the first jab? Yes or no? So for those of you with us tonight Who has taken the first jab and who hasn't? Okay, I'm going to do this just for the, allow me to just share my screen. I hope I've not taken over too much authority. I'm going to show you the results of this rapid polling. So in reverse order, of about half of the people that are on this, this call, about half of them have not taken the first jab, and about another 11 or so have taken it, so fairly even, which is kind of interesting. Let me go back to the next question. So stop voting if you can. You are time barred. Which vaccine would you prefer? These are the findings. So once again, Pfizer leads, followed by AstraZeneca, followed by, oh no, sorry, Johnson & Johnson is next, followed by AstraZeneca, followed by Moderna, then Sputnik, and actually the Chinese pharmaceutical, the Chinese vaccine, Sinopharm, is actually done quite well. It is now neck with the Russians. Let me come back to the risks. What are the risks of taking the vaccine? Ha, ha, ha. So the biggest risk, according to people, is, let's see, this the one that people fear most, and this is done in a slightly opposite way, right? So let me say the one that we are least afraid of is zombifying. That's thankfully good news. The second one is that we will become sterile. Thirdly, that we would not get the next jab. There's been a lot of concern on the group on this. Fourthly, that we might get blood clots. And fifthly, that we might get fever, fatigue, headaches, and muscle pain. Then there's a general category called other that we might want to explore in the chat a bit. So these are the findings of our rapid poll. Let me take it back to you, Lily, and just check whether you can see the questions from everybody. You can, great.
I'm seeing them here. Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks, Arungu. Thanks everyone for participating. It's interesting just to see that the responses coming through. And let's go to the chat first, Dr. If you don't mind. There are a couple of questions here that are related a lot to those who've already had COVID and the vaccines. So I think there was a study there, an article that came out some months ago, kind of guesstimating what percentage of Kenyans had already had COVID, but maybe had a mild case. It was never documented. And so these questions, I think, speak to that. Some of us who had that bad cold and cough a few, March, April last year, but never got tested, never knew if we had COVID. And so there's a question about if I have been infected with COVID-19, do I only need one dose of the vaccine, especially given that you've explained to us what that primary response that our system gives to the invasion of a virus? Do I only need one dose?
So there is science and then there is policy. Science informs policy. So for now, the science available is that ideally, if you had been infected, it means you need only one dose. There is science emerging like that. But it's not gained enough evidence for it to become policy. So for now, we follow the policy, which means whether you are infected or not, you take the 2 doses because there is no harm at all until we are sure that the infection is equivalent to 1 dose, and therefore you can eventually say, yeah, if you're infected, take only 1 dose. But remember that there is also an implication to that policy decision. It therefore means that you must confirm who was infected first before you give them the dose for you to decide who deserves only 1 or 2, which then from a health system point of view, doesn't make sense because then the cost becomes prohibitive and it becomes too difficult to actually do the vaccination.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that science and policy question because I think that definitely informs also the vaccine equity. But similar question that's slightly different though. If the second dose or second vaccine dose increases response capacity, what is the effect of having had COVID-19 prior to vaccination? So if I had had COVID, I'm getting the vaccine, am I going to feel worse? Is my body going to have a stronger reaction if I've already, lived through COVID?
So what happens is this: if you have had COVID and it's passed and you don't have active infection, you just have more antibodies. You don't have the virus anymore. The virus is gone. You have antibodies. And therefore, when you get your second, your first jab, it's like the body now is having a secondary response. Now, if you have active COVID infection and you get the vaccine, now what happens is that you are likely to have a little more exaggerated side effects. So whereas somebody who had no COVID had just a mild fever or no fever at all, you may get a slightly higher fever, you may feel more fatigued. That's the only thing that will happen. There's nothing that is fatal that will happen to your body. So what do we see, because I've seen questions regarding what if I'm infected, what do I do? So there are many people who are infected and they don't know. As it is now, 97%, 93% of our people are positive, but they have no symptoms at all, meaning that there are millions of people who have the virus, but they don't know. So the chance that you'll have the virus and you get vaccinated are very, very high. And there's no harm to that at all. But if you have the infection and you have active symptoms, then you're advised to wait for the symptoms to go before you get infected. Just like we advise when you have a young child who has a fever, we advise you to wait for the fever to go before they get vaccinated. So it's the same principles we follow. How long do you wait? You wait for the symptoms to go, and anytime 3 to 4 days after that, you can get vaccinated.
Okay. I think that was going to be the next question. Somebody was asking, is it 90 days? Is it 14 days? How many days do I wait? So my symptoms end on Monday. I have no fever, no cough, no discomfort. I'm functioning mostly normal. By Friday or so, I can go for that vaccine, and that's a comfortable window to wait.
It is a comfortable window to wait. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's very nice to have a doctor answering these questions instead of Google, because sometimes Google leads you astray. So it's good to have these timely responses to our questions. Another question from the audience. We're having so many flooding in, so we'll try and go through these quickly. What are the ramifications of the vaccines for those who are on immunosuppressants or have autoimmune issues?
So that question is quite common because there are people who are immunosuppressants. Maybe you have people on steroids for certain conditions, or they have, conditions that suppress their immune response. Now, what it means is this, that number one is that you're more vulnerable to severe disease if you are not vaccinated. So if you got the infection, you could actually end up with very severe disease. So number one is that the vaccine is needed for you to protect you. Now, the next question that people ask is there any side effect if I take that and I'm using immunosuppressants? Remember that if you're using immunosuppressants, the reason they're given to you is to reduce your immune response because maybe your own body has a very active immune process. Meaning that because you're using those, either the infection itself or the vaccine will not develop as strong a response as somebody who has a normal immune system. Meaning that you definitely need 2 doses because your body is slower to create the immunity you need because of the immunosuppressant. And that's the same condition for elderly people. The immune response of elderly people is also lower. So they definitely need 2 doses to ensure that actually they have adequate protection. I hope that's
so it's not that the vaccine is going to cause them more harm. It's just that they need both doses to give the body the boost it needs because their body is already a bit suppressed.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you for that. Similarly, there's a question about low platelet counts. So let me read it verbatim so I don't misunderstand their question. This participant says, I suffer from a very low platelet count and current research shows that the vaccine lowers one's platelet count. Can I risk taking the jab? I'm worried that I've not taken it and I won't take it until I'm very sure of this. So does the vaccine cause a lower platelet count?
So the vaccine doesn't generally cause a lower platelet count. But what we know now from the research going on in Europe and elsewhere is that in very few people, what's called a very rare possibility is that it may cause this issue around what we call people are calling generally the clots, but it is actually, I don't complicate this, it is actually something that happens to some people where their race and that condition results in some low platelet count and also some clotting. It happens, it's not something that happens to everyone who is vaccinated. So it may happen in 5 in a million people, okay? So we can't say that people who have low platelets therefore should not take the vaccine, and there has been no such advice. So I cannot tell you that you cannot take the vaccine, what I would advise you to do, because if you have a low platelet count, then you definitely have a physician following you. That's how you know you have a low platelet count. So there is no contraindication to you taking the vaccine, but please have a conversation with the same physician who takes care of you, because then that conversation needs to be had one-on-one rather than to be answered generally. But there has been no contraindication at all.
And thank you for saying that. I think it's good for us to keep reminding ourselves that the science is evolving, as you mentioned with the earlier, that the 8 to 12 week difference now with AstraZeneca. We need to stay on top of the science. We need to stay in touch with our primary care takers. So let me ask you, there's concern that we may not get the second dose of AstraZeneca, or maybe the supply will shortchange. And maybe in the meantime, Johnson & Johnson arrives in Kenya. Can you mix vaccine providers? Could I take a first jab from AstraZeneca, a second from J&J?
The answer, based on the data we currently have, none of the two vaccines have been tested together on the same individual. That's scientific data. So we can't answer that question because there's no data. Because ideally, you would expect that a certain cohort of people have received both, and we've seen how the response works, or whether there's any harm. There's no such data. So the current policy is do not mix the vaccines. Okay. If that data changes in future, and I know there are studies now going on in the UK on what we are calling mix and match. If we get results that it's safe and also gives you a good response, then we could change that in future. For now, there's no data that supports mix and match.
Thank you for that, Dr.
There's a question which was layered there, sorry, Lily, which is around the fear of the second dose. So maybe we can answer it at the same time, because Please. People are afraid the second dose won't come and this kind of thing. So let me put it clear here that the supply of vaccines has been completely constrained globally. Now, out of WHO, there are 4 vaccines that are approved out of WHO. I say there are about 7 or 8 in use, but the ones that are approved by WHO is AstraZeneca, Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson, those 4. Now, many of the countries like Kenya and across Africa and Asia are receiving their vaccines from a joint delivery system called COVAX. And that COVAX is only taking vaccines that are approved by WHO, meaning that our choice is the 4. For now, Pfizer, Moderna have been locked up in the US, okay? And they're also very difficult to deliver because they require negative 70 degrees. So you also have to worry about the programmatic integrity of the vaccine, that you are actually able to get it safely. If you can't get negative 70, even if you have the vaccine, we have to assure you that first we can deliver it to you safely. So these are the considerations. For now, we are relying on AstraZeneca. J&J is coming, but J&J has also not been available to purchase. Even if it's listed and approved, you can't purchase it anywhere, even if you wanted to, even if the government wanted to get it. Now, AstraZeneca, because it's not a challenge of Kenya, it's a global challenge, it's going to be resolved. And we hope that we'll be able to get enough doses for the second dose by the end of May. That's the plan for the government, that's the global plan, and the entire world is working towards that. So don't blame the government. It's actually a global problem that is being resolved with a global force. So we believe by end of May or early June, we should have enough doses for the second dose.
Thank you so much, Dr. I think that's giving people a lot of hope today. So speaking about this COVAX and the availability of these vaccines, we've seen that in the US this week, I think it is Pfizer is going to be approved for 12 to 15-year-olds. What do we know about the impact of vaccination on 21 and under, especially because what we have is AstraZeneca right now. So there's a question from our audience who really wants to know that 21 and under cohort, who we're also seeing are coming up with a few more serious outcomes than they were a year ago. What do we know about their outcomes and their availability of the vaccine?
So to do a quick correction there is that AstraZeneca is approved for 18 years and above.
Okay.
Pfizer is approved for 16 years and above. Now, why so? Let me go back to, I don't think we talked about pregnancy, but
we did not.
That keeps coming, and we will. But what happens is that when you're developing these commodities, not only vaccines, even drugs, if you're going to study a drug in people who are under 18 or women who are pregnant, it requires a separate ethical clearance and regulatory process because you're protecting lives inside a mother's womb and you're protecting children who can't give consent on their own. So because of that, when you have an emergency like this, the researchers decide to use the population that's easier to do the study with, which is the adult population. So there was no problem. Even when we say it's not approved for under 18, it's not because there was a problem. It's because there was no data to support it, because the data first available is the one which is easy to obtain, which is the people who can give their own consent. Same with pregnancy. Now, what happens is also, you have to look at the risk profile. Right now we know 70% of all our deaths or hospitalizations are for people above 50 years. That's a fact. And people who are below 19, for Kenyan data, contribute only 9% of all infections and probably less than 1% of deaths. So therefore, from a public health point of view, you want to focus on where the biggest problem is. So the vaccines are going to be approved for younger children, but they have not been a priority because they have not been at big risk. For now, 18 and above, for Pfizer, 16 and above.
Thank you for that. Do you expect that these will roll out soon for young people? I think, our teachers, some of our essential workers, they're being vaccinated now, as we understand, they're on the front lines. But then our kids at this age, they should be out. It's not good for them mentally to also be confined. And so I think there's that concern of, can schools really stay open, not just open once, but can they stay open for the long term without children being vaccinated?
So this is exactly what I said before, that actually the children are at very low risk of infection of severe disease. There are many theories around it, but generally we know that they are low risk. So they are not a public health priority to immunize, because even if they go out, the bigger risk is probably infecting elderly people who then may proceed to severe disease. Because children, even if they get infected, they recover, they move on, and they overcome the virus. So no one should worry about their child being infected, because they rarely proceed to severe disease. Actually, I think throughout this, we have seen very few children, actually more of them were hospitalized are infants, because they have a very low immunity. By the time they start getting common colds, remember the common cold is also caused by a coronavirus, largely, or a similar virus to a coronavirus. So these common colds give children some acquired immunity, which may be non-specific and gives them some protection against another coronavirus. So we don't have a big public health challenge with children, but eventually, as science evolves, then they may also be vaccinated to ensure that the virus then doesn't stop circulating in our in our midst. Yeah.
Which is what we want, right? At some point, we want it to die out because it can't find a host. It can't find anywhere to live, and we want it to just die out. Not us, but the virus. Okay, so we're running out of time. I've got a few more questions from the audience I want to get to, and I really do want to take just a few minutes to talk about vaccine equity. So the question is the vaccine protein-based? What of people who have protein allergies? Can they take it?
Okay. So let me see how to explain this. That vaccines are not, some of the vaccines that we give to children, and this, I want to explain where this came from, are cultured in egg protein. Okay? They are cultured in egg protein. Okay. So when the vaccine is finally extracted, it has some egg protein in it, and that's why they issue around, when you're given a vaccine, if it was cultured in egg, then it may have some egg protein. Therefore, if you have egg allergy, you may get, an allergic reaction. None of the COVID vaccines are cultured in egg protein. Does that mean that COVID vaccines are not proteins? No, they are proteins, but they're not cultured in egg protein. Because it is the protein in the vaccine that triggers your body to recognize it as a foreign protein and therefore develop the antibodies against the protein. Okay, so the COVID vaccines are proteins, but they are not cultured in egg protein. So they're generally not, they don't trigger an allergic reaction in you, because the protein in the egg will circulate and give you an allergic reaction. But the protein in the vaccine goes directly to the cells where it's supposed to work. So it doesn't generally start circulating and creating an allergic reaction. The body recognizes it, develops antibodies against it, and that's what is called keeps memory of it for the future. So there is no
Beautiful.
allergic contraindication on the COVID vaccines at all. So if you're allergic to egg, chicken, whatever, you can take the vaccine.
Cuckoo forever. Okay, that's good to hear. It just makes me in awe of the human body, truly. Just the way all those systems work together and in concert together. It's really extraordinary. One more question, and then I want to hear about vaccine equity, but I don't want to ignore our audience who has such great questions. Someone is asking you to explain asymptomatic infection in relation to these antibodies. Asymptomatic infection relating to antibodies. Maybe what they're saying is, if I never was symptomatic, do I still have the antibodies? Is somebody who was hospitalized for COVID have better antibodies or longer lasting? Do we know?
So let us say this, that any microorganism that lands in your body, a bacteria or a virus that actually enters your body produces antibodies against it. And that's the body's way of protecting you. So many of these come in, the body manages them, you never know. That's an asymptomatic infection. You never know, you have no symptoms because the body managed to manage it before it developed any symptoms. Now, the people who develop symptoms, there could be many reasons that are not very clear. One of them could be that if you got a high load of the virus, meaning that you're with somebody who has a high viral load and they're coughing, and therefore you get a big dose of the virus, you're more likely to end up with symptomatic disease, because by the time your body, I told you the first response is slow because it is completely new to the body. So the body takes time to develop. As you've said, Lily, it's actually a beautiful process. If you are to look at how the immunity develops, the body sends, then presents this, then starts to march, and it takes time. So if the load of the virus is too high, then the viruses could have harmed the body before the body produces that. So the differences could be, how much virus did you get? How heavy is your immunity? That's why the elderly people who take long to develop immunity, as I said earlier, are more likely to get severe disease than younger people. So there are many factors here that play, but even asymptomatic people do develop antibodies. That's how they actually overcome the virus.
Okay. Dr. Hari, I think you have to come back tomorrow because I keep getting questions from the audience and I keep getting reminders from the host. Please, 4 minutes left. So we have 4 minutes left. Let me put forward to you what I think is an important clarity. You said it earlier already, but I think maybe this participant just joined. Is there any truth that this vaccine was developed on feces, human feces?
No.
Just clarify for us one more time.
No, it's a clear no. It wasn't.
Clear no. Thank you for that. Maybe we can do a rapid, quick fire questions, in fact. Can you explain to us the difference between a PCR test and an antigen test? Quickly.
A PCR test is actually an antigen test. So what the person is asking is, can I explain the difference between a PCR test and a rapid antigen test? So a PCR test is an antigen test where it takes samples from you and looks for the antigen. An antigen is a protein which is found on the coronavirus or any virus, but there's a specific one that's found on the coronavirus. So the PCR takes the virus, then divides it, and then identifies. So it's more accurate. Now, a rapid antigen test is also looking for the same protein, but there is a new technology to discover it in a rapid manner. I mean, you can take it, put it in a mixture, and see a color change, which means that it's not as accurate as a PCR test, but they are both antigen tests.
Thank you for that. Excellent. Last question, I think, and then we have to turn it over. How do we live now, Dr. Hari? Some of us may get the vaccine in 6 months, some of us a year later. What would be your parting advice to us as a Nairobi community, as a Kenyan community, of how we manage our work, our life, our families in the coming months as we continue to live in this COVID context?
In very simple terms, I would like to say that this is in our hands. And I think until we understand the science behind the public health measures, then we'll keep listening to what the government said. And when the government makes another decision, we're like, now the virus has gone. There are people who think because the things were lifted, that there's no more virus. No, they were just lifted because the conditions that are needed to control the virus are not compatible with an active economy. That's the only reason. So you have to balance that. But the virus is still in our midst. So what my urge to my colleagues here is this: take control of the measures yourself and decide. So how do you take control of that? Watch out for being in a crowded space, because as I said, crowding is one of the factors that increases infectiousness. In a place where people are crowded and in close contact, and especially in a closed space, anybody would understand what that is. When you go to a bar where there are many people who are shouting and you are there for a long time, you are exposing yourself. That's as clear as that. If you're going to be there for a long time, if you're going to a church, then decide that you're not going to be closely in contact with anyone. The church is not crowded. It's not, the windows are open and you're not there for a long time. If you're going to a crusade for 6 hours in a closed space, in a crowded area, then you know you are infected. So you need to take control of this science and therefore make your own decisions. And then when you're going to be in those spaces, then wear your mask because you know you are at high risk. So take control of the public health measures. And then when it's your time to get vaccinated, please get vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think one more message maybe to our governments as well and to our leaderships of different entities. You know, when we were in Kilimani yesterday, we talked to many people, and one of the demographics we talked to are people who are immigrants into Kenya, who don't have access to healthcare, who may not get access to this vaccine, who are here for work or for refuge. And this idea of equity will always be with us. You know, I'm with you in Arungu in the sense that human rights, it needs to be ingrained in everything we do. So what is our message now in terms of access to this vaccine? What is your message to government leaders, to leaders of NGOs and other entities, you know, decision-making entities about how we bring some equity to the end of this pandemic?
My message is simple, that none of us is safe until all of us are safe. Remember that when you have a pocket where people are not vaccinated or they are not protected, that becomes a pocket for variants and mutations of the virus because it's playing unchecked. And therefore that variance could actually mutate to a level where it is no longer effective, or it's not effective, you know, from the current vaccines or treatment. So it's important to ensure that everyone everywhere has access. But then that means that our government must invest in the health system, civil society must agitate for that investment, and we must make sure that achievement of universal health coverage is our responsibility by putting pressure on our leaders all the way from the ward going up to the National Assembly. So this is really what I would like to say. But remember, the fact that you have a vaccine doesn't mean now the others don't need it. You're not safe until everyone is safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tari. Thank you for your service to our community and to our people. We are so grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, both Dr. Bakele Piper, it's going to stick, right? And Dr. Githinji Gitahi. It's been a wonderful conversation. I couldn't believe actually that we were going to get through some of the questions that are on it. And I think we've done extremely well. I'm going to hand over to a board member of the Kilimani Project Foundation, that is Emily Mutua, to just do a small, I guess, a small statement of gratitude from us. Emily. And just check whether Emily is there. Maybe she needs to be unmuted. Let's check. There we go. This is one of the biggest human rights violations that we've seen since COVID, I suspect, with a light touch, which is the tyranny of Zoom and muting each other. Welcome, Mutindi and Emily.
Thank you, Rungo. Actually, I was going to say some of us like talking and hearing our voices. So it was strange that I can't communicate, but as we said, it's for control, it's management purposes, and we just have to live with it. So Dr. Githinji, I want to say a very big thank you from the KPF, from Kenya Kilimani Project Foundation. We know we called you once, we cancelled, and you came back again. So I think if there's somebody who can be given the COVID Warrior Award, it's you, because we know how much time you're spending out there just educating the public, because information is not readily available, and we have questions that we really can't get answers to. And I think the beauty of your conversation and engaging with you is just speaking to us in English, not medical terms, breaking it down to the point where we can go and explain it to our grandmothers, our children, and everybody. It's just amazing, because from this talk, I believe most of our questions have been answered. Most of the questions people are asking us have been answered. And the strength is the fact that it's coming from a medical professional. You know what I mean? So the fact that we're saying, yes, we can take Gidinji's word for the truth, the way we take the Bible or the Quran for truth, then it's really amazing that you're able to do this for us. The myth busting around the vaccines, the effects of the vaccine, which is better than the other. I think that's just amazing, because I had somebody who just thought Sputnik is here. Can I go get it now? I wanted it. And it's very interesting when you're saying, no, wait. Just do a bit of research and then come and join this Kililogue. So we'll take you up on your offer. We'll do Kililogue episode 49. Irungu, remember that. Let's take that into perspective when we'll invite him back, just to see what the journey has been whenever we eventually settle this monster that has invaded our homes and the world. For the community, we want to say thank you very much for taking time between rushing home, sitting in your offices to listen. I'm sure the ones who are in offices and have enough time to get back home, you won't be locked down. So thank you very much for coming on board and engaging with us. We asked the question about the children. That was amazing, because the next Kililogue actually is going to talk about children and the youth and the school space for them and the public spaces, and what happens when a child has COVID, at home, at school. How do you manage that? Because they're energetic, they're happy people, they don't even know what's going on right now with this pandemic. So that's the next Kililogue. Look out for it. It's going to be exciting. And Dr. Gitahi, you can join us either as a participant and just listen in and throw in some words of wisdom around for us. And we're also calling on the community and friends of Kilimani to actually come and join us at KPF. There are many things we do. This is just one of the few engagements we have. COVID, we've taken it seriously. We've talked about vaccines. We talked about the illness itself in the onset. We're talking about children and youth. We're going to talk about financial wellness and basically just being wholesome and well within this COVID era. So there are many more series that are coming around with COVID-19, because you're looking at the human being and the community holistically. Part of that also, we're planning a few outdoor activities. We have a tree planting exercise that's going on. We normally organize small groups. We are actually tree planting the whole of Ngong Road. We hope to put down 5,000 trees by the time we are done with this pandemic, and we'll remember those trees as the Chinese came and cut the trees and gave us beautiful roads, and we built them up. We grew them back during a pandemic. So those are some of the things we do, and that's the engagement we want with the community. It's inclusive, we own it. We talk about urban spaces, we engage with the county government. For the environment, you're doing a Kili Cycle drive-by campaign on the 22nd, where everybody is invited to come and drop their recyclables. So we're actually flourishing in a way during the COVID season. So we're innovative, we're creative. Kilimani is active, not only the people who come to play and give us bad publicity, but that is not bad publicity. It's actually the security system working, as Irungu said. So thank you very much once again to the 50 participants who are on board, the Kilimani Project Foundation Board, thank you, and the Secretariat for putting this together, and the social media team and the digital team that has made this a success. So asanteni sana. Lily, you're awesome. I think now we put you on the panel of our moderators, and in KPF, we don't say no. So whenever we call on you, you just say yes and you come and wing it. Yeah. So let's do that. I think Wanjiko will send the details about how to become a KPF member on the chat. So please join, whether you're a friend, whether you're passing through Kilimani, whether you like our outdoor spaces that you come and enjoy your drinks with, whether you work here or live here, we are open. We have the Kilimaniacs is who we are, the people who live in Kilimani. We are manic about our community. And then we have the Kiliasporans, who are the friends like Gidinji. Come back, this is your home, you never leave home. Yeah, so thank you very much. Participants, I hope you're equipped with information and you're able to share with your families and your friends. Have a good evening and thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
I've been asked to make a public service announcement that please don't go to the bar now. It is against curfew regulations. This is to encourage you for tomorrow, especially for those of you over the age of 18.